Welcome, everyone, to this edition of the Temporal 3 Fire Alarm Podcast, where we talk all about fire alarm. We have a special guest with us today, Mr. Richard Roberts. Richard, welcome.
Oh, thank you, Brian, and it's great to see you again.
Same here. And as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Mr. Charles Ollner. Good morning, Charles.
Good day.
So, Rich, I'd like to start with you and asking you, tell us about your title at Honeywell and what you do.
Great question. My official title is Senior Industry Affairs Manager, and I often get the question, well, what the heck is an Industry Affairs Manager? But, my primary responsibility is, participation in the codes and standards development process. As we all know, the fire industry is driven by codes and standards, okay? I think I'm on 13 NFPA technical committees. I'm very involved in the ICC process and also get involved in UL product standards. In addition to that, I'm also managing the industry relations or trade associations. And then lastly, probably one of the more fun aspects of my job, I get to do cool stuff like this and training, whether it's in person, virtual, podcast. So that's kind of a 50,000 foot overview of what I do.
Awesome. So what you're saying is, Rich, that you're the guy to blame for all those things that the fire alarm technicians don't like in the codes, right?
Exactly. And plus, as people always say, do you guys really intend to make the language and the requirements as confusing as possible? And no, that's not our intent, but it seems like it comes out there more often than not. So, yeah, I got big shoulders. Blame me.
I hear you. So one thing that we like to talk about in this podcast is training. How important, and you mentioned doing training as well.
Mhm.
How important do you feel training is to the industry?
It's critical. It's definitely critical in intrusion, access control, video, but it might be even more important as it relates to fire. It's critically important to have the training on the product that you're installing or the products that you're installing. So, let's just forget about the code requirements right now. You really need to be intimately knowledgeable on the fire alarm products that you're installing because hey, it's life safety, okay? But then also, as I said just a minute ago, the industry is driven by codes and standards. No building owner installs a fire alarm system because they think they may need it. It's required, mandated by codes and standards. And codes and standards are updated typically every 3 years. So there's always new requirements coming in, and you have to be knowledgeable on that. So you have a code compliant installation. So training is critical.
Absolutely. Charles,
And
anything to add to that based on your
absolutely,
field
I have two
experience?
primary things. One is I agree with you, Rich, so much. Product training, technology changes all the time, and we need to
Yeah.
stay current with that as professionals in the industry. The second thing is codes change all the time, just as you mentioned, every 3 years. It's a cycle. We have to stay current with those. Those two critical aspects of life safety are important. The second thing is from way back when, I'm really excited, Rich, that you're on this podcast with us because you were a big inspiration for me. I remember seeing your name with NICET 4 listed under it, and I was in awe of that back in the day. And I was like, oh my gosh, he got NICET 4. I can go for it too. So, thank you for the inspiration that you provided me behind the scenes that you didn't even.
Well, the three of us, we all go way back, 30 plus years. That's a great thing about this industry is that the relationships that you build, and that means a lot to me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, next thing I'd like to discuss is code. And there's some interesting things going on with one of the oldest, not the oldest, but one of the oldest technologies in fire alarm communications, and that is POTS lines, telephone lines. There's some interesting stuff going on. And Rich was kind enough to share a document with us from the California State Fire Marshal communicating to building owners about the elimination of POTS and some of the requirements for MFVNs, managed facilities voice network providers. And there's a lot of really interesting stuff going on there in the industry. Rich, you want to elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, POTS lines, and that's plain old telephone systems. In other words, the copper line from the protected premises to the supervising station back to the jurisdictions communication centers. That's an old technology. And the Federal Communications Commission several years ago, they basically told the carriers that they no longer have to support that. Now, that said, it's still being used throughout the country, but probably more in the rural areas. I would say the major metropolitan areas, they've already, pretty much switched that over to, other technologies. And, as it relates to MFVN, that operates and it emulates the way the POTS technology used to work, okay? And it's still permitted in Chapter 26 of NFPA 72. But there's a lot of constraints to it. We don't make it easy to use MFVN. And the reason for that is, if you look at all the carriers, whether it's AT&T or another carrier, it's the responsibility of the subscriber, okay, the business owner, the homeowner, to maintain that system. So if the carrier decides, which happens all the time, right? They make changes to their infrastructure. They make changes, upgrade software and stuff like that. So what may work today may not work, next week, next month, and so on and so forth. So, my recommendation is that going forward, you really need to use a technology like cellular or IP technology.
Absolutely. Big concern there. And those performance-based alternatives really are the way to go. And you eliminate, and even if you have copper now, even if you have POTS now, as Rich said, due to the national broadband plan, you may not have it in the future. So now you have to go back to your customer and say, hey, your phone lines are going away. Even if you even know about it, that's a lot of times you don't even get told about it or find out at the last minute when you don't get the test signals. And just step up now and sell that technology now rather than wait. Charles, take on that?
Well, one thing I'm curious about is the association's perspective. With POTS going away, we have so many dealers out there that have thousands and thousands of accounts that are still connected that way. So has the association pushed anything in regard to this, or how's that?
Yeah, I think if you look at the Monitoring Association, they really are advocating for, customers, dealers to, upgrade to performance-based technologies and move away from, MFVN or POTS, because really that's the wave of the future.
Absolutely. Well, the last topic of discussion that we'd like to talk about today, and Rich, this really becomes incumbent on you, is upcoming code changes. Now, prior to this podcast, you and I had discussed some interesting code changes that are coming up in NFPA 101 for fuel gas detection. And there's some other things recently that you and I have discussed. I'd like to turn it over to you to let you talk about these.
Yeah, probably one interesting aspect relating to fuel gas detection is that I really look at it to be very similar to carbon monoxide detection back probably 2007-ish, okay? Back then, the NFPA, they just created an installation standard that was NFPA 720, okay? And so you had product standards. and then you had an installation standard, and then the next thing was, okay, let's try to get this into the model codes to mandate it, and then as the states legislatively adopt the model codes, which makes the requirements legally binding, then you're going to have CO detection installed in occupancies. And it started out in the residential code, the International Residential Code, and the scope of that covers detached 1 and 2 family dwellings and townhomes not more than 3 stories. And then it started going to other codes, and then really, as it stands right now, all occupancy classifications with a known CO source is required to install CO detection. Well, we're kind of in the same place with fuel gas detection. Fuel gas is different than carbon monoxide. Carbon monoxide is generally not flammable or explosive, but obviously
Right.
it's very toxic and could be deadly. Fuel gas, natural gas or propane, it is very combustible and flammable. And, it's very common to read in any news outlet nowadays of, an explosion or a fire caused by a fuel gas leak, whether it's inside the home or in the utility piping infrastructure to the home or to the building. Okay. And actually, the National Transportation and Safety Board, NTSB, they've made a recommendation. Of course, they can't mandate anything, but they made a recommendation that fuel gas detection requirements be added to the ICC and NFPA model codes.
Wow.
So finally getting around to your question, okay, is for the 2027 edition of NFPA 101, which will be published and released later this year. I'm cautiously optimistic that there will be requirements to install fuel gas detection in new hotels, apartment buildings, and new K through 12 schools that have a known fuel gas source. Now, I say
Hmm.
cautiously optimistic, okay. There's an opportunity in the NFPA codes and standards development process, kind of a last ditch effort for someone to say, okay, we don't like what the committee did. And they can file a NITMAM, notice of intent to make an amending motion. And then that will be discussed for the not only with the committee, the respective committee, but the NFPA membership that's attending the annual NFPA meeting, which will be in June of this year. Now, the vote in those 3 committees, it was probably like 12-2 in favor of it. So
Mhm.
I really, like I said, I'm cautiously optimistic that no NITMAMs will be filed. But if they are, I'm very optimistic that they will be rejected in June during the technical session at the NFPA conference.
Hmm. It's
So I
int-
have a question on that for you,
Yeah.
Mr. Roberts.
No, Richard, please.
Availability of product is always an issue. Does Honeywell manufacture fuel gas detection devices?
No, not at this time. In fact, as we're relating to detectors, that's the type of detection technology, whether it's smoke, heat, carbon monoxide, or fuel gas. They're designed and to be listed to be connected to a control unit. Alarms are not. That's the type of product that you can go to consumer outlets like Lowe's, Home Depot, or Menards here in the Midwest. Okay, there
Sure.
is ample product on the alarm side, but as it relates to the detector side right now, it's very limited. So I'm sure that other detector manufacturers, okay, they're really working on it. I will say, it just kind of popped into my head. I believe, and I might get fired for saying this, I believe Macurico has a fuel gas detector. Okay. See, this is a great part of my job. I'm doing what's right for public safety and the industry. So for our listeners today, they may want to go and check that out at Mercurico.
So, Rich, you mentioned something about the code committee, and something that we often don't think about on our side is that it's not just the fire alarm people, the manufacturers, the AHJs that are involved in code development, that there's building owners and building owner type organizations that are involved in it as well. And we all know that building owners certainly want to spend as much money as possible to keep those building occupants safe, right?
Yeah, yeah. They got
And
unlimited pockets, deep pockets. Yep.
yeah, exactly. And that's why sometimes that things don't make it through the committee. Sometimes things that make sense or may get objected to because it's going to cost them money. But that's the way it works. Why the way the code committees work.
Well, I mean, if you look at the NFPA process, they want to make sure that all the technical committees are balanced, okay? And you just mentioned some of them. You got manufacturers, you got installation companies, you got code authorities, you also have academia involved, end users. I'm probably leaving out, special
Insurance.
experts. Insurance, exactly. And they want to make sure that each one of these stakeholders don't have enough people on a committee to drive something through. So, typically these committees, they have 30 people on them. And, they only allow so many manufacturers, okay? They only allow so many code authorities, okay? And that makes sure that it's a fair and balanced committee. Now, obviously, that raises a lot of tension at times, because trying to get everybody on the same page and to move the ball forward is very difficult. But generally speaking, though, we all do work together, and very rarely does each one of these stakeholders get everything they want. But I know compromise is a dirty word today, especially in politics, but we do reach a compromise and move the ball forward.
There you go. Well, Rich, I want to thank you again for joining us today. I appreciate you taking the time out of your day. I know you got a lot going on. And
as we all do.
Again, yeah, but I know you in particular. I know you're a busy man, and I do appreciate the feedback and the insight as to what's going on. Again, that'll conclude today's podcast. Thank you, both you fellas, for joining us today, and I hope to see you again in a future podcast.
Thank you, Rich. Appreciate it tons.
Thank you both, and I'd love to come back.